My name is Walter Mays, and I am going to be your interviewer this evening as we spend time with my friend Judy talking about her newest book, In the Unlikely Event. Now, who am I and why do I get to be out here interviewing Judy? I worked for many years as a publisher's sales representative selling Judy's books all over California and Nevada. And one of the nice things about my job when I started out was I got to be at sales conferences with Judy and hang out in bars with Judy and go into bookstores with Judy, and it was a really fun thing. And I've spent a lot of time in my career with authors, the great, the near great, and the scum of the earth. And there are precious few that mean as much to me as the woman that I am going to introduce to you tonight. With a list of credits that goes on and on and on, and the recipient of nearly every award that could be created in the world of writing, she has been a trailblazer and a major influence on multiple generations of young people who are growing up and learning the truth about life in a Judy Blume book. And then in 1980, she started writing for grown-ups, and the grown-ups started learning the truth about life in a Judy Blume book. Judy does not hold back. So prepare yourself for 45 to 50 minutes of fresh and delightful conversation between two old friends. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Judy Blume. Use your mic.
I know. Do I take it off?
If you want, or you can just move it in front of you.
I'm really bad at this. One time I tried to undress a microphone and had one of those nice fuzzy things on it.
That's not what.
Oh, take it off like this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, about this far away. Okay. So here's what we're going to start with.
Okay.
I promised her I was going to tell a story. I am a professional storyteller, and it's impossible for me to not show up with a story. Here is my favorite Judy Blume story ever. And I have a lot, and I promised her I wouldn't tell all of them. Back almost 20 years ago, when I was hired as a storyteller to work for Reading is Fundamental, one of the largest proactive organizations to put books into the hands of children everywhere, they were celebrating their 30th anniversary in a very, very large set-up bookstore that they had created in a large shopping mall outside of suburban Washington, D.C. I will not name the mall. I will also not name the organization that was setting up the event because it went a little out of control. 4 days, 50 to 60 authors, hundreds to thousands of children being bussed in and trucked in to meet authors like Joanna Cole and Bruce Deegan, and Paula Danziger, and I could go on the list. Anyway, there was pretty much everybody who was hot at that time was at this event. And we went Thursday, and we went Friday, and we got to Saturday. And when we arrived on Saturday, there was a line at 9 o'clock in the morning of 500 people. 500 people lined up for an author who wasn't going to be appearing until 2. It got way out of control real fast, for this was at the height of Goosebumps mania. And R.L. Stine was going to be appearing in person. Truckloads and busloads of children from as far as 150 miles away showed up. And at one point, the mall police estimated that there were over 4,000 people there, crowding the escalators, forcing the mall security to close everything down. No one could get in or out of the store, and the very nice people who were running the event had to make some really fast decisions. So in the meantime, I'm just sort of standing off to the side, because I was useless at that point. And down the mall, as the giant crowd from the other direction comes walking my friend Judy. And Judy's walking up, and Judy's going to sign at 3. That's when her autographing is. Now, no one can get in and out of where the signing is. No one's going to sign anything. It's a traffic gridlock. And Judy walks up and she goes, "Walter, are all these people here to see me?" And I said, no, this gets better.
I don't remember that part of it.
I know. It's all right. You were very nice. And then I said, no, they're here to see R.L. Stine. And she said, fucking Bob Stein. So, this sounds like I'm making her into some sort of a diva. Let me tell you then what this diva did. For the next 2.5 hours, because no one could get into the store to buy Judy Blume books, they set Judy Blume up in an empty store across the mall. And for 2.5 hours, she signed worn and loved and read copies of Goosebumps.
No.
From Bob Stein's friend, Judy Blume. She does not even remember this because that's just a day in the life of Judy Blume, people. That's what it's like. So the reason I start off with this story is because it is vital for me to share with you that this woman is one of the most giving writers in the business. Her love for children, her love for her readers, her love for fellow authors, and the way that she promotes them and supports them and does everything that she can to make a world where we all get to read what we want. So
Well, that part is true. The
Good God.
world where we get to read what we want.
And I was going to take it backstage, but you stopped me, so I'm going to say it out here. You swung for the bleachers on this book. Stylistically, the kind of writing feat that you attempted to do with this book, whether or not you did it on purpose or whether you just couldn't not do it, you swung for the bleachers and you hit a home run, my dear. This is stylistically a very brave and bold, and there's no reason, it's good reason why you're getting the best reviews of your adult writing career, because this is an extraordinary book, and you are all very lucky that you're going to have the opportunity to read it, let me tell you.
Well, thank you, Walter. That eases the anxiety.
That's what I'm here for.
I'm always very anxious when a new book comes out.
Right.
I
right.
live with it for years. I live with this book and with these characters for 5 years. And then it's like, do I really have to let them go? Don't I need to work a little bit more? But you get to the point where you do have to let them go.
Yeah, because they belong to them now.
And send them out into the world and hope for the best.
I was telling her backstage, your publicist has really been earning her money on this, and there's a lot of think pieces online, in print, on TV and radio. There's been a lot of think pieces, and it's hard for writers not to want to compare the way you write for kids and the way you write for adults. I have never felt there was a huge difference.
There isn't.
There really isn't?
No, there's no difference in the process. There's no difference in any of it. It's all horrible. I mean, it's all painful. And
do you hate writing? Oh boy.
I hate first drafts. I dread first drafts. And yet, I realize that when I'm in that little room all by myself, I'm happy. I go into this other place. I'm different. I'm unafraid. I don't think about anything but the characters. And that's good. That's a good place to be. And then sometimes, I'll take them down from the shelf and I'll thumb through it like with blubber. And I look at it and I say, and I'm easy on myself once it's published because it's gone, And I'll say, but how did I know that? Because I don't know that anymore. And you know things when you're writing that come from this other part of your brain that you don't know that you know. You're not aware of it. You're just not aware of what you know. And so it's interesting to take them down after a lot of years and look.
It's like a meditative state, isn't it?
The writing.
Yeah.
It is.
It's like a meditative
I
state.
guess.
You go to a higher or different level.
I don't know if it's higher, but it's different.
Acting is much the same way when it works.
It is.
It is much the same way when it works.
I do say it's like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a great actor. And I do think, there is a similarity. You're playing the roles. You're playing every single character that you create. And you get to be the director, too.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure to have that kind of artistic freedom. I am always aware when you're writing, when I'm reading your writing, I am always aware of your simultaneous roles as parent, as friend. God, you're a good friend when you write. And as daughter. I can feel all of those roles actively filtering through. This is one of the reasons why I feel that you're writing for adults and you're writing for kids is your friendships in your children's books and your friendship in this book are every bit as endearing and as perfectly etched. Do you think of it through the mother filter? Do you think of it through the daughter filter? Or is it just all the total Judy and it just has to get on the page somehow?
I don't think of anything except the story that I'm trying to tell. I'm totally unaware of anything that, you might find something in it, you might analyze it and see, I don't go there. I just do it. I don't think about it. I'm in their lives, they're part of me, and it just, I can't say it comes easily because it doesn't, or it wouldn't have taken 5 years. It was hard. It was very hard to get this one right.
Well, it was worth every moment.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Enough good stuff about me.
You want all the dirt now? No. Okay. So I want to talk about a couple of aspects of the book that really stick out. This both stuck out when I read it, and then it sticks out in the way that it has been critically acclaimed. And so here's one of the ones that I like. Things happen that are big and impossible to understand, like 3 airplanes falling out of the sky. And the human impulse is to try to connect the dots and make meaning. Trying to ascribe some sort of motivation. Is it the communists? Is it some failure at the Newark airport? Should the Newark airport be shut down? Was it some other reason? And one of the things that I watch you work through in this book in particular is coming to terms with not knowing. It's a really powerful thing to read about. What is that like for you? It's very
hard. Well, it's very hard. Remember, this book, for those of you who don't know, the inspiration came from these 3 events that really happened when I was 14 years old and in what we then called junior high. And yet, I've been a writer for 46 years, somebody told me the other day. I said, oh, really? 46 years? Maybe. This story was there. I'm a writer, an incredible story, and it never dawned on me to tell this story. So I guess that it was buried so deep. I never forgot it. I still remember standing outside the classroom and the boys all talking about it, and the boys saying, it's definitely flying saucers, or no, maybe it's zombies, but it's aliens, and they're coming to get us being the children, the kids, the teenagers of Elizabeth, New Jersey, because of course it's all about us, right? And so when one crashed a block and a half from junior high, and one almost came through the window of the only girls' public high school in town, and the third fell. I hope this, I don't mean to spoil the story, but this has been written about everywhere. The third fell in the middle of a moonlight night onto the playing field of the only orphanage of town. Of course the kids said, it's about us, right? They're coming to get us, but who? Who? And so the smart girls gathered around, and I wanted to be one of them, and said, it's sabotage, a very sexy, sophisticated word. We had no idea what it meant, but yes, it must be sabotage. But who? And the adults too. Communists. I don't know who else, because it was clear it was a siege on our small city of Elizabeth, New Jersey. And sometimes we thought, well, probably they were going after the kids of New York, and they made a little mistake, the wrong turn, and they wound up, coming down in Elizabeth, which was right on top of Newark Airport. And I got to tell you, when I went back there with a TV crew a few weeks ago, and I took them to the sites, it went through my mind again, no, it can't be coincidence. It has to be something else.
Conspiracy theorists don't need a whole lot.
Well, my husband would tell you I'm definitely always a conspiracy theorist. I don't know where you are, George. Is that true? Where are you? George.
George. He's here somewhere, don't worry about it. So, did we find him? Good. So,
He's probably sleeping.
well, he's heard all this before, hasn't he?
Well, yes.
Okay. I'll try to liven it up for George's sake, okay?
Okay.
The idea that you can't know is mirrored in the book, both in the way that Miri tries to deal with it, and then I just keep going back to Uncle Henry.
Uncle Henry.
Uncle Henry, who is trying to write about it as a journalist, and he's resorting to language that is not journalistic at all. What is the purple prosy one?
No, but that's real.
That really happened?
That's from all of Henry's stories are from the real news stories of the day.
Wow.
It came apart like a frozen, it broke up into like a swollen cream puff. That was in the paper. It came down like an angry, wounded bird. And I was determined to use the language of these news reports in the 50s. Remember that we didn't have any TV news coverage. You didn't come home from school and see this on television like you would today. So there was no way to know without these portraits being painted by the newspapermen.
Right. Yeah, he was a really important character for me when I read the book, because he was modeling how adults are also having the trouble connecting the dots and making, the boys talking about, zombies, and the girls talking about sabotage, but then here's this guy who's like supposedly smart and a writer, and he knows, and he can't figure it out either. And that was a really important thing for me. So what it comes down to for me in this book is that, and you've done this theme before, is that, yeah, shit happens and life goes on. There is tomorrow. There is school tomorrow. There's a wedding to plan. There is graduation to happen. The babies are going to be born, and it's simultaneously so obvious but so hard for people to grasp. And you write about it so beautifully. It's a very uplifting aspect of this book, and I don't know if you care about uplift.
I'm an optimistic person,
Okay.
and I like to leave my readers with on that optimistic note. And it's a story of tragedy, but it's not a tragic story.
Right.
And life goes on, as my father used to say to me all the time.
Oh, really?
You
All
know,
the time?
the character of Dr. O, there's a dentist in this book, as in so many of my books, because my father was a dentist, and I adored him. And my first wonderful editor, Dick Jackson.
Right,
you know
I
Dick
love
Jackson.
Dick Jackson.
Dick Jackson said to me many, many years ago, someday, Judy, some graduate student is going to do her or his thesis on teeth in Judy Blume books. And my father, so the character who is most from my own life in this book is the character of Dr. O, who is a much beloved dentist in town, and who is called in to identify the victims by their dental records. Now, this was never, ever talked about at home. Nobody ever talked to us about any of it. No parents, no teachers. I've gone back to all of my friends from school to ask them, did anyone ever talk to you about this? No, adults never talked to us about this. It was, protect the children from bad thoughts. I never saw any of the crash sites personally. My brother did. He was 4 years older, and he was away at college and came back and did. But that was life in 1952, where I lived anyway. It was, look, we've been through depression, and we've been through the Second World War, and we're fighting in Korea now, and your job is just to be happy. And so you better damn well be happy. But you pretended because, of course, you weren't happy all the time, but you didn't want to disappoint your parents. And so you pretended that everything was good.
Why the decision in this book to have the fluidity of time, the looking back, from the 35 years
35
later?
years later.
Yeah, why the decision to do it that way?
Because I read in the paper, in my 5 months of research, that there was a 35th, not the kind of reunion that I've given them in the book, and that's not a giveaway because it happens on the first page. But there was a big story about interviewing people who had been there. And that gave me the idea that I do want to start this book and end this book when my characters are 50 years old, and then take them back to the year they're 15 and 17 and 18. So that I got to start with a hot flash to satisfy all the women who write to me and say, could you please do a book about Margaret in menopause? So Miri has a hot flash. So there, I've done it.
Good, because I don't want to read the Margaret in menopause book, okay? I really don't. Okay, I want to ask one more question about Unlikely Event, and then I want to ask a broader question about you. Okay, so Elizabeth Taylor's hairstyle, the details of the Korean War, the songs that were being played on, was it your show of shows or was it the radio? What were
Hit Parade.
Your Hit Parade. Sorry, this is not my era. I'm
Your
10 years
Hit
too young.
Parade, yes.
So all of those details, you really didn't you have to go read a little and check up to make sure you were right?
Totally,
Oh,
absolutely.
you did? Okay.
Oh my God,
Well,
yes.
I know your memory's good, but it's not infallible.
Correct.
Excellent.
Correct. And for instance, Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon didn't really come out until later in the year in '52. So I didn't really use it in the book, but it's part of my playlist because it's so good.
Yeah.
And because it speaks to the story so well.
And the details about aviation. You have a daughter who's a pilot.
Well, this is a really crazy thing. So my daughter became a commercial airline pilot after she was an English major. Is Chris here? Is her her dear friend from college, from Wesleyan, is here.
Did he study aeronautics and become an English professor?
No, but he lived out here. They all shared an apartment when she was studying. She was at flying school out here and became a young commercial airline pilot. And she's a reader. And so when she read an early draft of this book, she said, "Mother, how could you never have told me this story?" I never told anyone this story, although, I never forgot it. I never told George, 35 years, I never told George this story. And so that, it feels good that it's out, and it's out there in the world now. But so strange for someone with my kind of memory, and who's always written about, things that I do remember, that I never thought of telling it. And one more thing, how lucky am I that Philip Roth, who grew up in the Weequahic section of Newark, very near Elizabeth, whose mother went to high school with my mother, that Philip never told this story. Because he would have done it so well, and then I never could have told it. I think because he's that many years older than me, he was away at school when it happened. So thank you, Philip Roth.
Thank you, Philip Roth.
I'm a great fan of his.
There is not just in this book, but I think in your books in general, there is a permeable quality between what we think of as this is how a teenager behaves, this is how a child behaves, this is how an adult behaves. I think oftentimes one of the things that makes you so appealing to readers of all ages and all sexes is that you don't follow very strict lines and rules. You don't put people in boxes and leave them there. You kind of let them bust out. And I've always thought that was one of your most appealing qualities. So I want to know, 50s upbringing, 60s marriage, children. When did you bust out?
You know, I don't like rules, although my husband would say that I follow rules. I once wouldn't go past a barricade because there was a rock concert in the park, and I said, no, you can't do that. And he said, oh, you're such a good girl. But inside my head, from the time I was little and made up stories inside my head, I was never such a good girl. I had a lot of stuff in there always, and I don't like to be told what to do, what I can do and what I can't do. Although I was a good girl. I did what my mother said I should do. But there was another person inside there. And that person, I don't know, finally came out through writing.
The women who are your age and slightly older, who on the national scene blazed a trail for feminism, Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, those women who, Jane Fonda actually, those women who really stood in the harsh media spotlight and took a lot of the heat. Were they inspiring to you in your, I'm a housewife raising 2 kids and I'm only dreaming of writing? I mean, what's going on in 28-year-old Judy Blume's head with 2 babies and all that kind of stuff?
In my heart and soul and guts, I was out there marching with them. The women's movement came really late to suburban New Jersey. But I mean, someone asked me the other day, are you a feminist? Well, of course I'm a feminist. I mean, it's changed meaning over the years, but yes, I was there from the beginning, from the very, very beginning. Yes, there's a wonderful show called Makers. I don't know if you've seen it. It's, they did, I don't know if anyone saw it. It was a special on PBS, The Makers, and I was so proud to be a part of that. And you can see it. It's on, I don't know,
yeah.
It's on AOL, it's
Gotcha.
on something or other. Yeah, and it's all of us who were there in the beginning and what we were thinking and what we were doing. And yeah, I rebelled. I rebelled.
Good.
I rebelled late. It's better to rebel when you're a kid, but I did it. At least I did it.
Exactly. Well, you definitely have. I mean, we all can look back to the 80s and look back at hairstyles. So, you know, oh my God, we would not show you pictures of me, but I was watching a clip of you on Letterman. The first time.
That was so funny. Daytime Letterman.
Daytime Letterman.
Oh my God. I never heard of this guy, and they put me on his show, daytime show, and I have to tell you, they sent me out, and somebody whispered in my ear, he doesn't like women, especially smart women, so, you know. And I'm like, okay. And I'm on the show, and we're talking, and I keep hearing what sounds like alarm clocks going off. And finally, I said to him, do you hear that? And he's like, hear what? And he had hidden alarm clocks in all his drawers in his desk. And they were going off at different times. Right. And I loved it. And I loved that on that CBS morning show that was all about Dave, you know, saying goodbye to Dave.
Oh, yeah.
At the end was my little segment, and I wanted to say, but I was on Dave on that, you know, however many weeks he had that.
He didn't have it very
show.
long, and nobody watched it because nobody knew what to do with David Letterman in the middle of the day because he had to do cooking segments, and it was too weird.
No wonder the guy hid alarm clocks in his drawers.
That's right. All right. So I started working for Dell Publishing, which was Judy's paperback publisher, in 1981. And I believe one of the very first jobs I had to do was to work what's in publishing when books all land on a certain date. It's called a laydown, and work the laydown for the first printing of the paperback edition of Super Fudge, which was the first children's book to have a 1 million copy first printing. It was unheard of. So I spent days driving around Northern California, and those of you who've lived in Berkeley, you know, Mr. Mops and Cody's and Hink's department store and all of the wonderful places that had the books, and making sure that the display of Super Fudge was up and counting how many copies were in it, because this was before computers, and I had to tell people how many we sold the first day and how many sold the second day, because it was and this was a bunch of, I don't know if you remember the old paperback sales reps. They were all, you know, they were good cigar smoking and, you know, stay in the bar until 2 o'clock in the morning, tequila drinking guys. And the idea that we had to go run around chasing a giant children's book, but it changed the way that children's books were marketed, because nobody thought it could be done before that. And then after Super Fudge, everybody was chasing it, you know, and it wasn't until Francine Pascal that anybody could do it again. It was a good 5 years until it happened again. But was there a moment when you kind of had to like think to yourself, oh my God, I'm Judy Blume?
I don't even know if I knew about that.
You didn't know that?
Well, I know I'm Judy Blume.
Oh, thank God.
That. But I mean, I do. But I don't know if I knew about that big laydown. I don't remember that. But I can tell you a funny story about Francine Pascal.
Go for it.
Okay, so the first year we went to Key West, we rented a house sight unseen. And we meet a guy who is with the owner of the house, who's supposed to let us in. And this guy says to me, "You're not Judy Blume." And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "No, you're not. Because recently I sat next to Judy Blume at a dinner party in New York, and you're not Judy Blume." And I'm like, well, what do I do? I mean, I've rented this house. Maybe I had a book in the trunk or something. I showed him a book. And it turned out that he sat next to Francine Pascal at the dinner party, who was then for those of you who don't know, she was a very big-selling children. She had a series.
Sweet Valley High.
Sweet Valley High. And
Yes. Positive murmurs coming from the audience.
And he sat next to Francine Pascal, and in his head was successful children's book writer. And so when I showed up, it was like, not you. I did, however, get to rent the house, and I've been happily in Key West ever since.
Oh, thank goodness. Oh, thank goodness. I once had a bookseller say to me after an author event that you were at, and there were like 75 booksellers, and I was the publisher's sales rep and everything. This bookseller came up to me afterwards. This is back in the mid to late 80s. She comes up to me and she says, "She's a very, very nice woman." And I said, "Yeah." She says, "I was not expecting that." I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, all those horrible things that she writes in her books."
She really meant Francine Pascal.
No, she didn't mean Francine Pascal. She meant you. When did the people who could not deal with the truths that you were telling, when did that start to have an impact on your daily life?
That was 1980.
1980?
See, you don't even remember.
It was right
I
before
wrote
me.
all those books you're talking about in the 70s.
Right, they were all 70s books.
And in 1980, after the presidential election of 1980, it was like the censors came out of the woodwork, and the feeling was it's our turn now, and if we don't want our children to read these books, then no children should read these books. And it's going on to this day, not with my books necessarily, but with books in general. Now, right now, everybody is after Sherman Alexie, an incredible book, The Real True Story of a
Part-time Indian.
Part-time Indian, a fabulous book. I gave it to my grown son to read, and he said, "This is a really good book." But, because kids like it. That's the big thing. If kids like it, there must be something wrong, and therefore it should be challenged and possibly removed from schools and libraries. They don't come after books that kids don't like. They don't even know what books kids don't like, but they know when they get popular and when kids like them. to start looking. But you know, the truth is, we should be honest here, right? From 1980s, from the extreme religious right where it all started, we've come to a lot of book challenging from the left.
Oh, yeah.
Also.
Oh, yeah. Extremism is bad on both
And
sides. as far as
trigger
I'm concerned.
warnings. And
Yeah, your books all need trigger warnings. All of them. Yeah.
all books then need trigger warnings.
Yes.
Because in any book, there could be something to bother somebody.
When I was in college, I was fortunate enough to have Ray Bradbury as playwright in residence, and we did the world premiere of the stage version of Fahrenheit 451, and I got to play the fire chief. And he wrote a monologue, a 6-page monologue, explaining why the books were burned, which he never comes right out and says in the novel. He just leaves you to infer it. But he decided that for a theatrical audience, they needed to know in no uncertain terms. And that's what he would have a field day with trigger warnings. Bradbury would have a field day with trigger warnings. So when you stood up and said, I will not be treated like this, I will not stop writing books, I will not have my books be challenged in this way, you took a great deal of heat. And you, whether you wanted to or not, you became a standard bearer. You became the one that, long before anybody else was really doing it, you were the one that the news went to, and the reporters went to, and the opinion pieces went to, and suddenly it became as if you did nothing else in your life except defend the First Amendment. And God bless you for that. But didn't it at times get in the way of writing?
It got old, and you know, I'm very friendly now with Joan Burton, who's the executive director of the National Coalition Against Censorship. And it's like, Joan, do I still have to say all those things? Do I still have to answer all those questions? And she said, you know, Judy, it's sad, but you do, because there are a lot of people who've never heard them before, and you have to keep saying it. We all have to keep saying it. And so we do.
All right. I'm going to...
Now we're going to do the polka.
Are we going to polka? Awesome. I'll just pick you up and swing you over my head. Not a problem. So I'm an old publisher's sales rep, so I look at covers very carefully. This is the most delightfully retro cover in the entire world. It looks like it's a book cover from 1952. I love it so much. Were you happy with this cover?
I love it so much back. I do.
Oh,
I do.
just
From
look at this.
From the second Carol Barron brought it to the house, because she had brought a few others to the house, and I said, I don't think so. You know, I don't
Right.
think so. And then she came to the house with this, and I said, oh my God, I love it.
So
Yeah.
just speaking between the lines here, just so you understand how this works in the world of publishing. She just let this slide, but I want you to understand. The publisher came to her house with copies of the cover for her approval.
No.
Judy fucking Blume, ladies and gentlemen.
No. We're good friends.
I know.
We're good friends. Carol Barron and I go way, way back. And
So do I, yeah.
And I knew from day one when I got this idea that I wanted Carol to publish
Good.
this book. But I never showed her one written word until a year ago now. We talked for 5 years. Every time I was in New York, we would have one of our power breakfasts. And we're the same vintage. And so we would talk. And her father also had lots of Jewish gangsters in his life, and my father was fascinated by Jewish gangsters, and so I was always fascinated by Jewish gangsters. And we have a very famous one in this book, Longy Zwillman, which
love that name.
People who don't know think
No,
that I made
thought
him
you
up.
made him up.
No,
I had to
he's
go look.
real.
Longy Zwillman.
Longy Zwillman,
awesome.
Abner Zwillman, yes.
Oh
He was a bad boy.
Yeah, he certainly was.
He was a very bad guy.
And you do right by him in the book in terms of his badness. So we
Murder
got
Inc.
that.
But anyway, Carol and I would talk, and we would reminisce, and I would tell her about characters, but I wouldn't show her a word of what I had written until I had like the 20th draft, and it was an okay draft. And I said to George, we were on our way to London, and I said to George, this is it. It's either it's either click and send or burn. And George said, why don't you click and send first? Because you can always burn it later. And that was the first that she read it. And it was published a year later, which is incredible in today's world.
That is very fast.
Yes, but you know why? Because we sat around in a room, Sunny Mehta and Carol Barron and me, and I looked at our age group and I said, if you guys want me out on the road and you better do it fast. You better get me out there while I'm still walking and talking and tap dancing. And so they really got it out quickly.
Well, God willing, you'll be walking and talking and tap dancing for a long time, but I'm going to give you we're going to turn to some of the questions that you wrote here on the cards. And I just picked the 5 that interested me. So, things I want to know the answer to. That's how it works, people. You got to get past me. Is this really your last book? Oh. We're not asking you.
I have a lot of creative energy left that I'm going to have to do something with, but I don't know what it will be. I would say, I change my mind on this every day, and George would tell you, she says that after every book. When I finished Summer Sisters, I said to George, I'm never, ever doing this again, ever. It was 3 years of hell. And he said, okay, fine. And I said, promise me this, promise me that I won't be a bag lady if I don't write again. And he said, I don't think you will be. I think you'll be okay. And I never was going to do it again. And I meant it. But, then the bug bites and you do it again. So I'm a little wary about saying, which I've said all over the place, that I'm never doing this again. I don't think that I will do another long, complicated 400-page novel because this took 5 years and I'm 77 and there are other things I'd like to do. Right. I'm not saying that I'll never write another book. I've been thinking about my memoir, the first 12 years, because that's what interests me. But who knows? I haven't even told any publisher that.
Shh, don't tell anybody. All right, Chelsea wants to know, what are you reading right now? What are the things that you probably are traveling with some books that you get to read on your own now that you're not writing?
Yes, but when I am writing fiction, I can't read fiction.
I bet you can't.
And I learned that the hard way by once reading a good book while I was writing a book, and it cost me 3 months of not being able to write. I did read a book that I love very much, and I believe she's here at the festival, and I'd love to meet her. Karen Joy Fowler's We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves. I did read that while I was writing, but it was okay because it was so different. I thought that was a great book. And on the plane yesterday, I read Molly Ringwald's novel, When It Happens to You, because she's going to interview me tomorrow night at the Castro Theater. And I wanted to see what her writing was. Very, very impressive, I thought. Very good. Right. And I've got, oh my God, that's what I want to do. What do I want to do when I'm not doing this? I want to sit and read. I miss reading. I love reading.
All right. You knew there were going to be a few questions about the kids' books.
Well, that's okay.
In starring Sally J.
That's
Friedman.
why they're here.
That's right. You raised them. In starring Sally J. Friedman, why didn't Sally's mother want her to use the changing room? This has always puzzled the writer of this question.
That's an autobiographical book. That's my most autobiographical book. So I should remember. I'm sure it was, germs. It was my mother, using the changing room. It wasn't so much being seen. It was, standing on the floor.
All those other people and leaving their things in there, yeah.
Right.
Okay. What do you think Fudge grew up to be?
Well, of course, I know Fudge because he was my son Larry's.
Larry grew up to be a filmmaker.
Larry does a lot of things, but that was only in the very beginning. Fudge then took on his own life and went his own way, a little bit away from Larry. But originally, Larry was the role model for Fudge. He was an interesting child. That's what we said. He ate his supper under the table like
Like a dog.
Frisky the cat.
Like
He called
Frisky the
himself
cat.
Frisky the cat. And my friends would say, you better do something about him. But he's just fine, and he eats at the table with everyone else now.
Grandchildren? Do you have
One.
grandchildren? Do you like being a grandma?
I love it. I always fantasized, we have 3 children between us, grown children, and I thought I'd be surrounded.
Right,
I'd be
right.
a little like the storyteller dolls in New Mexico. I thought I'd be surrounded by them. But I'm very grateful to have one.
Good.
And
Good.
it's possible I'll be a great-grandmother before I'll be a grandmother again.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And you'll be a great grandmother.
Thank you.
There you go. All right, we've reached the point where I need to come to a stop because we've agreed to go X number of minutes and no longer, and then I want you to be able to get out there and sign the books for all the people. I unabashedly adore you, and there's just, no, it's just silly. It's just,
Well, that came across.
does it a little bit?
It did a little bit.
I mean, I mean, I know I'm no Samantha Bee, but I really wanted to get up here and just she did Samantha Bee with the 92nd Street Y in New York, and it's like, oh my God, Samantha Bee! It's like, oh, what a great combination that must have been. But this is a great pleasure for me, a great honor for me to see you at such a high moment in your glorious career. Long may you wave, and just keep out there doing all the things that you have done: the writing, the mothering, the grandmothering, the tap dancing.
Thank you, Walter.
All right, thank you.
Thank
I love
you
you.
so
I love
much.
you. Thank you
I
so
love
much.
You too. Thank you.